Welcome.
The Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community is a regulatory science initiative that aims to facilitate innovations in pathology, as well as advance safety and effectiveness evaluation. The PI Collaborative Community aims to harmonize approaches to speed delivery to patients through collaboration in the pre-competitive space. The PI-CC is open to all stakeholders, public or private, including but not limited to academia, industry, healthcare providers, patients, and advocacy groups. Meetings of this kind are an example of lawful activity under federal antitrust law, because the focus of the meeting is on government action or policy, including the industry's responses or positions taken with respect thereto. However, antitrust monitoring is needed for companies' own protection, since they are direct competitors meeting together. These meetings need to stay within protected subject matters and need to be monitored so that they do not stray off into inappropriate areas, such as pricing and price terms, sales and service territories for particular products, customers and customer territories, each company's individual decisions regarding selection of suppliers or customers, marketing plans and especially future marketing plans or new product offerings, other proprietary or competitively sensitive information. Today's meeting will follow the written agenda, and there will be no discussion of pricing or other prohibited topics. If the discussion veers into those topics, we will terminate the discussion. If you have any questions or concerns about the propriety of a discussion, please raise it immediately, and we will take a break to determine how best to proceed. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium acts as the formal convener, and we will follow their conflict of interest policy. For additional information, we defer to our Code of Conduct and our website, www.pathologyinnovationcc.org. We look forward to moving the field forward.
All right,
Awesome.
Emma.
Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to our findings and results meeting for SEER 2.0. Today, we're going to kind of go over our primary endpoint, show you a little bit of the database comparisons that we've done, and look at the non-microscopic cases and get into some more specifics about the breakdown. So to begin, just as a recap, here is the table of NACER the diagnostic confirmation breakdown for codes 1 through 9. I apologize. As we've talked about before, solid tumors cover 1, 2, and 4 as microscopically confirmed. It doesn't really use code 3, whereas heme does. Non-microscopic is 5 through 8 for both, and unknown is 9. This is the same across NACER, SEER, and NCPR and PCR. And then if we get into what our primary endpoint is, yet again, we're looking at the percentage of cancer diagnoses rendered by light microscopy. And what we see is that 93% of all cancers are rendered through these microscopic means. Here you see from years 2010 to through 2019 for the SEER database, all tumors are 93% of tumor, 93.1 across the board are rendered microscopically. If you split that into solid and heme, solid is at 93.5% and heme is at 89.9%. Of note is solid and heme do not have the same volume of cases. So there are over 6.7 million solid cases that we've looked at, where there are less than 1 million heme cases. In addition to that, we wanted to address some of the thoughts from last week about which database we should use. So we've got access to the NPCR data, which is combined with the SEER data. This is from the November 2017 submission. And it's for years 2001 to 2015. It finds that 94% of cancers are microscopically confirmed. In the SEER database from the November 2021 submission of the same years, we find that 93.1% are microscopically confirmed, and you can see the breakdown here. The next two SEER columns that we have are what we have used for a lot of our data analysis in this project. The November 2020 submission covers years 2010 through 2018, and the 2021 submission also includes 2019 and some updated cases from the prior years. But what we see across the board is that 93% are consistently confirmed microscopically, and about 4% are confirmed non-microscopically, with a small range in the unknown cases. We are working on getting access to the NACER database as well, and hopefully, we'll add that comparison.
Quick note, Uta, so of course this is half of the analysis that Ahmed asked for, and I believe he may or may not have access to the NACER database because you have to be like a member, etc. So I know he couldn't make it to today's call, but it may be helpful to ask for that as part of the collaboration or so, because I mean, he suggested it, but I think Emma so far didn't have luck, so she contacted our cancer registry and the Massachusetts Cancer Registry to get access to that, but it's like a specific membership you need to actually get that data. But so I don't know, we can of course reach out to him, but maybe if you can help prime that would be great.
I think he might have a privileged position since he has been doing this kind of analysis in the past, and I believe that he will be willing to help with this issue. Yeah.
I mean,
so
clearly,
I'm pretty convinced he does.
Well, he suggested it, so you know.
No, he knows how to do it. So that's for sure.
So having that as, let's call it, another column here in this,
Yeah.
I mean, this will likely be as either a supplement or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
great. Plus, I think it shows exactly that epidemiologic thoroughness that he probably appreciates and others' work as well.
No, the point was what Ahmad said. There might be a justification to just go for the SEER data, because he said that very frequently SEER data contains underprivileged populations. So if there is a reason, or if you have a justification to go for this population or these different people, then it does make sense, because there you will have a comprehensive analysis. However, if you want to address or want to describe the entire North American market, then I think you're better off, and this is what Ahmad tried to emphasize, you're probably better off with the NACER, and you will be more comprehensive. And I think this is what is of interest for people who might develop non-microscopic tests for the diagnosis.
We did do the deep dive as he suggested, and if I can I briefly share my screen? Let me just show you quickly. So this is the reason behind the SEER, that it accounts for these diverse populations, especially in these fractions. So clearly this is not the population-based stratification, but it actually is accounting for diversity. And in this specific document, we also show that, you know, for example, Arizona Indians are from special distinct regions are polled to actually account for these arguably by numbers minorities, but in a fraction they're represented well in the SEER database. So I think that was definitely important.
And I think this is really an issue if it comes to care provision. So right now we are having the ASCO meeting. I'm not attending neither in person or virtually, but it is a clear topic that there should be care provision, particularly for all people, and particularly also for underprivileged populations in the US. And if this is helping your cause, that might be just a justification to go for. However, I do understand that the market does comprise a lot of other people or people who are maybe less represented in the SEER, and then it would make more sense to go for the NASA data. And I think this is what Ahmad was elaborating on. So given the general, there he is. And so this is the point. If you want to go for inclusiveness, then SEER is a good point. If you want to see if there are differences in care distribution, that might be helpful as well. However, if you just want to go for the general population, yeah, stick with the NASAR.
Ahmad, great seeing you. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's late already, but thank you. And it's Friday. You may have seen already on the screen, Emma did already sort of the subset analysis, and we had some issues getting access to the NASA data, but if you could potentially help with that, we just discussed it, that would be great. All right, so I would consider this a key, let's call it supplemental table, I presume. And if we could add a column NASAR, depending on, Ahmed's willingness to help and or contribute, that would be great.
Absolutely.
All right.
And so from here, we're going to move down into a little bit of like the breakdown. So as we've spoken about, overwhelmingly, we're seeing that 93.1% of cancers are diagnosed microscopically. So what makes up the 7% subset? In the SEER database, we found that that subset is 51 solid cancers and 20 heme cancers. I'm sorry for the messy slide, but I wanted to fit it all together. Here are all of the 51 solid tumors, giving the percentage microscopic, non-microscopic, and then any additional percentage to 100 would be unknown. So as you see, for instance, 8002, a malignant tumor, is half the time diagnosed microscopically and half the time the confirmation method is unknown. I've highlighted a couple cases that I found interesting, but I will be the first to admit that I am not the expert on any of these, and I would love to hear about if any of these catch your eye.
Yeah, so
Ahmad, as the ophthalmologist, will probably go for the from and so if think of
biopsies from the trains, you will find too much noise around. We don't take biopsies from the eye tumors generally, because we consider if we are going to take a biopsy, then it will be already extraocular. So I mean, increasing for other tumors, I believe it can be included in the treatment. Vaginal biopsy can be the best method, for example, in any other eye tumor that happen at the globe. So for a tumor like uveal melanoma, we rarely make a biopsy, but for a lid melanoma, we usually conduct the biopsy as a part of the treatment. Okay, this is the dilemma of such biopsy issue in eye tumors. Okay, that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you. I definitely have many more questions. I think staging brings up a really good point that we should probably, I would like to look farther into. Yeah, and then we've run the same for heme. Here are the 20 heme cancers. As you can see, almost all of them are some type of lymphoma or leukemia. I did try to highlight macro, I'm not sure, 9761, Waldenstrom's, I'm not going to try to say that, as well as myeloma as the two that kind of pointed out to me as different from lymphoma or leukemia. And then chronic eosinophilic leukemia is just the highest percentage non-microscopic. So I wanted to include that as a point out as well.
Can you just quickly go back to the solid tumors for a second?
Sure.
So what I thought like is very interesting is that some of these are likely, I mean, just for explanation, the selection of this 6.9% is because the non-microscopic fraction is higher than 93%, correct?
Yes.
Or in other words, the microscopic fraction is less than 93%. I should say it that way around, right? So that still means, for example, the adamantinoma of long bones, which is, excruciatingly rare, but is still diagnosed with 88%, as you highlighted here, using the microscope. So if you look at the retinoblastoma, whether it's differentiated or undifferentiated, 2/3 still have some sort of microscopic confirmation. Like the eye is probably removed, which is an irreversible procedure to my knowledge, and then probably subsequent examined. So the final diagnosis is still rendered with a microscope for most cases still, but that rate of microscopic confirmation is fundamentally lower. But across sort of the vertical board, there's only like, a malignant giant cell tumor all the way on the top with 28% microscopic. And if you now move to the heme side, that trend, so to speak, that still most of these cases are diagnosed using the microscope. I mean, I just wanted to point that out because, you couldn't tell an eosinophilic leukemia in any other way than by using a microscope. But maybe there's some coding difference when you use a flow cytometer or when you use other laboratory equipment, like a complete blood count, for example.
That would be my assumption as well. And Waldenström's is considered a lymphoma.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so the myeloma is a myeloma, but still the Waldenström's is a variant.
Awesome.
Ahmad
Thank you.
wants to say something.
Ahmed has his hand raised.
Yeah, so I think the table mentions that from if we go to the previous slide of the retinoblastoma, or any, it mentions how many of the retinoblastoma is, the differentiated retinoblastoma is diagnosed as microscopic or not microscopic. It does not mention how many of the retinoblastoma is diagnosed microscopically. So here it says how many of the differentiated retinoblastoma is diagnosed microscopically. Okay, it is not a representative of how many of the retinoblastoma in general is diagnosed microscopically. Okay, So it does not represent the situation in retinoblastoma. If we want to get a representative figure of the retinoblastoma, then we have to get all the retinoblastoma together and check how many of them were either differentiated or non-differentiated. Okay, and this will represent together, will represent how many were actually were diagnosed microscopically. Okay, because knowing if it is differentiated or non-differentiated is the key. I mean, is depending on the microscopical examination. Okay,
Maybe
so
I'm not.
it is meaningless. It is meaningless to know if I mean the 33% here that mentioned as undifferentiated, or the 20% that are mentioned as differentiated, are wrongly described, because no one will describe it as differentiated or non-differentiated without microscopical examination, right?
Unless it's coded like that.
Yeah,
So,
unless it is coded wrongly, right?
correct. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole premise of the ICD-03 codes is that there's a histologic type and behavior, which implies that you should have done histology, which implies that you used a microscope. So in other words, the NACER code 490 is applied as non-microscopic for still a certain tumor. So it is assumed, let's say the 20% differentiated retinoblastoma, at least the coder thought, since this is a differentiated retinoblastoma not confirmed microscopically, I believe the rule is to code it to the best of the abilities, right? So I
But
think you're right. It's wrong to
I
say,
mean,
yeah.
I mean, we can write something about the quality of reporting in the
Yeah.
in the SEER and the NACER from such findings.
So we can
So it's interesting.
we can deduce that non-microscopic histologic type encoding must be wrong. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, that sounds bizarre. We have to probably find a better way to word that, but no, but yeah, you're right. So in the case of the Waldenström macroglobulinemia, I think, if I'm saying that right, it's probably like the M spike, electrophoresis, and like other lab techniques that make this up. But then once that's diagnosed, I think usually a bone marrow biopsy is performed and or some additional histologic testing. So it's probably also clear that for some of these cases, the diagnosis is rendered, and then another lab test is added later on to confirm it. Uta, you had mentioned a question about some neuroendocrine tumors. I forgot. Emma, there was the one like an HCG producing tumor we picked as one of the examples, right?
Oh,
I forgot
yes.
where yeah.
That fell on the other side of the 93% line. So I can pull that up if we would like to see that. It's just on a separate document.
Uta, you mentioned that because there may be a larger fraction of those tumors that could be diagnosed using serology, right?
Exactly. So there are some tumors, usually in urology, that can be diagnosed with blood tumor markers, and then that would, or any other way of imaging, so non-microscopic imaging as well. And so I think that might be an option to group those ones together, and of course also with other blood parameters, like I saw the insulinoma. This is something you could also measure in a different manner, and you would see that in a patient also purely from the phenotypic appearance. So you would not need to biopsy that, or not in the first instance.
I mean, to Ahmed's point, it could be that many of these tumors are annotated as, let's say, microscopically confirmed when in fact they're not, right? So I think the other way around is also possible, you know. Okay.
And then just to wrap it up, as we discussed today, we did see primary endpoint concordance across these databases, across NPCR and the SEER combined database, as well as just using the SEER on its own. And like we mentioned, Ahmad, if you could help us gain access to the NACER database, we would love to run the same concordance tests. But overall, we find that 93% of cancers are microscopically confirmed. And we looked at the breakdown today, and I have plenty of great questions that I can get back with answers, hopefully next week or earlier.
So
I can pull up I have the Excel sheet right here if we want to check out those. Here. If you don't mind, I'm going to share one more thing. Sorry, it's just an Excel sheet, so it's not super pretty. But this is what Joe was referring to. There's this set of tumors that you can see from about line 26 to line 31, which are diagnosed primarily using X3, which is, I don't know if someone else has that off the top of their head.
with adjunct laboratory tests, right?
It would be a flow cytometry test. So you do use FACS, fluorescent activated cell sorting, and you would use particular markers for those ones. And so there are, or it could be fish, but there are probes that go for these different markers. Yeah. So if there is a particular suspicion, then that would be tested. And it's more or less, as far as I understand, it is common in our setting here that this is being tested regularly, because this has a relevance for the prognosis, and then the treatment is adjusted according to these analyses. So it's really a very crucial part in leukemia diagnosis, or leukemia and lymphoma diagnosis. Yeah.
All right. Other suggestions? So I mean, of course, we have to somehow portray the data. I think Emma's working on a time trend, so probably we have that by next week to just show, I mean, we know already that it looks relatively stable over time. I think, Ahmed, you had shared the beautiful interface where people can basically interactively work with that data, so we would be happy to include that if we're allowed to. I mean, I think that would be great for others to explore, you know, their favorite tumor, etc. And then we get to the beautiful part of somehow writing this up, meaning creating a first draft and then sharing it with the group. I know the time didn't work for many of the other folks here in town because it's like, you know, main work hours here. Yeah, so open up for other comments or suggestions to just, I think we have already two at least great points for the discussion, the minorities and the different databases, which is great. And then the other part is, you know, the potential bias in terms of quality of annotating or coding.
As I said before or during the week, I had that idea as well. So of course, when writing it up, you can first describe it as a tumor agnostic approach. So you really go in there blindly, but at the end of the day, you will have to take care of the different aspects of the tumors. So some of them can be measured with blood-borne markers, and some of them can't. And for instance, in the metastatic setting, sometimes one might waive histological diagnosis if the blood bone markers are speaking for themselves. And you do have another way of imaging, like a bone scan, for instance, in a metastatic bone lesion, and you would have a hormone sensitive tumor, then that would play a role. Or, as I said, the neuroendocrine tumors, so everything that can be secreted from a gland in the body that might be diagnosed in a different way. So that would be one idea to summarize the findings that you've just shown to us. And then, of course, comes in the entire lymphoma leukemia diagnosis that is on a regular basis also associated with non-microscopic but still cell-attached markers that are used in routine diagnosis also outside our hospital.
Emma, this was basically your results section.
Absolutely. I'm trying to write down as much as I can.
Yeah, so I think the adoption of digital and cell-free testing is we have to look into how to somehow incorporate that, because I still think, other than providing this baseline, let's say primary endpoint, also the point that Ahmed made, if it all relies on the quality of the reporting, and if people just code things, that's one element that creates or introduces a bias. But as as ctDNA assays come on board, it may be that the tumor is initially diagnosed using a certain modality. And, maybe there's a way to say what the initial modality is. I mean, I'm just wording this out now, but the coding right now relies on one element. But we all know that the diagnosis is a process where, for example, for some tumors, it starts with even a physical exam, and then you can find something. So the initial modality of identification versus the first additional supportive objective test versus the final, let's call it confirmatory test, that concept is of course not represented. But I think ctDNA testing plays exactly with that paradigm, in lack of a better term. But not sure how we can tackle that with this data, but including some cell-free graph in addition would illustrate that those two concepts can't be merged right now because there's no coding for it. And yeah. Other comments?
I just had more of like a question. Hopefully someone that knows more than I do might not have the answer. But when it comes to reporting which diagnostic confirmation method is, I guess what I'm wondering is, like, does that normally come at the end of a patient case, somewhere in the middle? How does this go from a registry then to SEER, and SEER and NPCR and NACER talk about having stringent guidelines for their data regulation? And I'm just kind of curious if anyone knows any more about that than I do.
So I don't know all the steps. I'm sure Ahmed knows a lot more about the steps downwards, let's say from a hospital level. But in the hospital, the coding people run queries, and they have a specific data entry database, and there's legal requirement to run, let's say, ICD diagnosis to track what your patient volumes are, and the subset of cancers is parsed out and then secondarily annotated. So at first I thought that's a little bit redundant. So if a pathologist says it's a T2 tumor, and then later on, let's say another, liver biopsy is taken and it turns out that it's a stage 4 metastatic disease, the T2 still stands, but at the time it was not known that it's a systemic disease. So after a certain time that will come out, and the initial diagnosis would be, let's say, stage 2, but the final would be stage 4. That's integrated at Mass General in our cancer registry. And then the cancer registry submits data packages to the state registry, and the state registry, when part of, let's say, SEER and PCR, they have also like requirements to submit that data after additional verifications, etc., forward. How that works, let's say, on an individual case basis, when someone identifies an error, how addenda are issued, etc. I'm not too familiar, but I'm sure Ahmed knows.
I'm sorry, Ahmed now is in a tunnel, so the connection will be very bad. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so regarding the data quality and the procedures of data collection, it is described in very big manuals. And just you don't need to bother yourself with the methods that the cancer registrars used to and the central registry used for cleaning the data. So you just need to mention the session of the CDC database that you used, or the SEER session that you used, exactly as written in the DIC file. When you export the data from the SEER stat, you get a DIC file, .dic, dictionary file, data dictionary file, and you find the session written and that the session name written in that file, and you can use this name in your reference to write in your paper, and it should be enough. And then use the website as a reference, and the website of the SEER database, or the CDC National Cancer Registry, National Program for Cancer Registries. Okay.
Ahmed, I think the question was more for Emma's understanding, not for the paper, if I understood you right, Emma, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear your sentence.
I think Emma was not concerned about how to write this in the paper, but just to understand how that actually works, just for her interest.
Yeah,
if you know.
this is. Yeah, it will need to read the manuals of data collection that I've mentioned. The manuals, because it is not single process, and it is collected from the hospitals, from the clinical practices, from the labs, from different heterogeneous sites. It is not single site, and it is not one single method to collect and clean the data from all these places. And then it is connected using central ID number. So it is a very big process that she needs to read the manuals for both CDC and the. It is not single registry, so they have to. You have to read all the manuals for all the registries to know everything about it.
Sounds good. Looks like I've got some reading for the weekend.
I love your
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
All right. I think that concludes today's session, huh?
Just a sec, just something.
Yes.
I had a suggestion. I'm for the time.
Might be the tunnel. Uh-oh. I'm afraid Ahmed is explaining a key aspect right now, and then we missed it.
It's a long tunnel.
He muted himself, so I guess there is some kind of
I'm sorry.
disturbance.
I'm sorry. So it is the software. So I was suggesting using the health discrepancy indicators for collecting also the access discrepancy, the access to pathology services.
I'm not familiar with
So
the health discrepancy indicator.
Yeah, so the discrepancies between sexes, between males, females, in accessing pathology services. Maybe this can be an idea for this project or for this paper or for another paper. If just put it on the agenda, because I feel it interesting. And the access to pathology services based on the sex, based on the race, and the age groups. So the question here, do all of these groups have the same privilege to access pathology services at the same way, in the same way?
I think that's an excellent idea, because like this, you can justify also going for all the different subgroup analysis. And of course, you could find, again, inequalities in care, access to care. And this would give you the rationale to use the SEER instead of the NASER. So since you said you need to have a good justification to use SEER data, and like this, you provided the idea yourself. I like that.
It was one of the original parts, you know. You know, as always, the project evolves to its self-destruction to be reconfigured in the end.
Yeah, the point is there is a specific software on the website of the SEER program for using this. So we use the SEER stat to prepare the data and then export the data from the SEER stat and use the health discrepancy software to conduct the analysis. Okay, you will find the software also on the SEER stat, not the SEER stat, sorry, the SEER website, the software page of the SEER website. Okay.
Love it. I think that would be great to plot the time trends for, let's say, you know, some of the minorities that are in SEER. And can this be done with the NPCR and the NASA data as well?
Yes, actually, it is independent of the software that you prepare the data. So if you have your own data from the hospital, you can use the HD or the health discrepancy software from this year and analyzing it in the same way. Okay, so it is data independent. If you have the data from SEER or from NPCR or from NASER, you can analyze the data independently.
That's awesome. I think we have our work plan.
Thank you all so much for all of your suggestions.
Wonderful. All right. Have a great weekend. Great seeing you. And thanks again for all the help.
Take care. Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend too.
Bye-bye. Bye.